welcome to my Precision Teaching podcast. Today is June 26th, and I am very excited to be with you. Yes, it's been a while since we last had a podcast, and I am hoping that now that things are in my schedule back to what I consider normal, to start providing podcasts at least once a month. The forum is going to change somewhat, as indicated by this month's podcast. Not only will I'm going to have different sections on the podcast, and as each month grows, more of those sections will be laid out. But I'm going to try to feature an interview at least once a month, and hopefully two in the future when I have more regularity in podcasting. When I have a podcast for 2 weeks, then some of that time in my podcasting will be devoted to reviewing articles, to talking about updates in the precision teaching world, and other things like that. And of course, also having a section for an interview. So today, I am very pleased to present an interview with Dr. Steve Graf. Dr. Steve Graf is retired professor from Youngstown State University. He taught in the psychology department, and it so happens that Dr. Graf was the first person to introduce me to precision teaching. I attended Youngstown State from 85 until 92. Of course, that seems like a long time to be an undergraduate, but part of that time I left for the military. So I had a few classes with Dr. Graf, and he certainly is a very inspirational person. And this interview that I'm going to share with you today, I think, is a very nice kickoff to the interviews that I'll be doing. So with that, let's not waste any time and let's get right into their interview. Well, I would like to welcome Dr. Steve Graf today. And Dr. Steve Graf is actually one of my mentors. And Steve, you have, it seems like it's been a long time since I've actually had you for class. That was the 80s, the mid 80s and late 80s that you and I were together. That seems like a long time ago. But I would like to start off, Steve, by maybe asking you if you could tell me and our listeners what your history's been with precision teaching. So, for example, how did you get into precision teaching? Who were your mentors and colleagues, and so on?
Okay. I was in graduate school at Ohio State in the late 60s or middle 60s, and I was taking courses within both the experimental and clinical area, and I was taking a particular applied behavior analysis course. That instructor said that there was a speaker coming to town who was going to speak at the Med Center, and he highly recommended that we catch his act. That turned out to be Ogden Lindsley. And Ogden gave 3 talks over a 2-day span, and I managed to see all 3. And so that was my first contact with precision teaching, or common language for analyzing behavior, which is what he was talking about at that point. Then once I finished graduate school and went to Youngstown State as a fledgling professor, about the second year I was there, I had an opportunity with a colleague, Chris Sweeney, to put on some sort of a program for students and area number of talks over a 2 or 3 day span. So I got to interact with him on a personal level, and then that's when I found out really more about precision teaching. And then from that point, it was about a 3-year period before I had any contact with him again, and that was when ABBA started around 1975. That sort of gave us an opportunity to meet yearly, and so that was my start. I should point out, in '72, I think we had Ogden at Youngstown State in February, and in June I went to a short course that Og offered in Kansas City. It was a 1-week intensive where there were about 24 individuals, and everybody had their own overhead. So it was quite a interesting learning experience. And some of the other people there were Eric Houghton and Elizabeth Houghton and Nancy Johnson and Carl Koenig and Hokelof. So that was my first real intensive vision teaching and standard acceleration charting.
Now, were they there as participants, or was this like a big production learning experience?
Yeah, the people I mentioned were all part of the training staff.
Could you talk about what that short course was like? What would happen? So Og was there, and he had a number of people with him. And how long did that last? What were some of the things you covered?
It was a week in length. At that time, there was a behavior bank that was in operation, and Og had put together a precise behavior facts kit for precise behavior managers. And so everybody got a kit, and it had a number of transparencies on different aspects of charting and precision teaching, so that everyone and then we just sort of went through all of that with people being able to ask questions, and then various exercises that various members of the training staff would lead. And sometimes we'd break up into smaller interest groups. And this was also, I recall, punctuated by Chris Christopherson music. Og was into kind of country and western at that particular time. So the overheads and the music was really quite an interesting atmosphere.
How many people would attend these courses?
Generally about 24 to my recollection. And I think there were 6 or 7 of them over a span of 5 or 6 years.
So you learned about, well, precision teaching, charting, other aspects of behavior for Og first. You completed your degree, you attended the short course, and then for your career, how would you describe what you've done with precision teaching from that point onward?
Well, I started teaching an applied behavior analysis course around 75 or so, and spoke of the standard behavior chart. But I found that I really wasn't getting satisfaction from the other courses that I was teaching at that point, because it wasn't involving standard behavior charts. So at some point along the line, I just decided, well, I'm going to use the standard chart in all courses that I teach, at least. general notion was to bring precision teaching and standard acceleration charting into every course. I still found a number of problems, and at that point there weren't very many materials that one could refer to or call on. And so about 93 or 4, I put together a monitoring behavior, which was a general psychology textbook that was based on, loosely based on precision teaching and standard acceleration charting, but at least it had those components as core components. And because I had written it, it allowed me to present material in the text, which I haven't found in other texts, and then be able to concentrate and use class time for other things and not spend any time lecturing. I did the same thing with the monitoring relationships book, which was for course in intimate relationships that I also taught. So I had a couple of books then that I could use to incorporate the standard acceleration charting, but it was mentioned and part of the course because it was aligned with the textbook.
So that brings me to a question. I recall when I was an undergrad at Youngstown State, I remember I took a few classes from you, but there were some classes that I missed. For example, I remember you, I heard that you taught a class and some of the concepts that you covered, or topics I should say you covered, you were talking about the Lone Ranger. And then I also had a class with you, which I did take, where we talked about learning, and we talked about, that's where we read the text from, why am I blanking on his name? Robert. Yeah, Robert Monroe. And you've taught a lot of very interesting classes. So I'm wondering, do you have is there a favorite class that you had, or maybe favorite classes? You've had, you said you started teaching at YSU, was it 72 or 75? 1970. So, and you retired in 2005? Right. So, that's a very long career. So I'm wondering if you could reflect on that and tell me if there were any favorite classes you had, or which classes were very rewarding to you.
Yeah, I liked all of the classes. The verbal learning class was a course that I had set up by request when I had come to Youngstown State. The department chair at that time was interested in adding some experimental courses. All they had was the experimental course per se. And so he had me develop, teach the perception course, the cognition course, and the verbal behavior course. And those were all courses which had been part of my experimental major in graduate school. So the interesting thing was that with my experience in precision teaching and standard acceleration charting, I really became much more interested in that area and much less interested in the experimental areas per se. So when we got some other professors in who could teach those other areas, I was glad to give them up. Those became non-favorite courses. The verbal learning course I sort of turned into endpoints of verbal learning, or kind of taking it to the extremes. So we studied Tom Brown and Robert Monroe and would later turn into courses as well. So the remote viewing course that I taught in the 2000s a couple of times was very interesting and quite different. Once Og and I had written the standard acceleration charting book, I was able to teach a standard acceleration charting course and taught that once a year for 2 or 3 years. So that was interesting. And then most recently, retirement, I've been interested in on extraterrestrials and still been able to use standard acceleration charting in all of them as I.
Are you teaching these courses at the university or the university and beyond?
The only course I'm currently teaching now is the one on extraterrestrials, disclosure, and alternative energy. And I'm teaching that once a year. And I have it's a 5-year window for individuals who have retired to continue part-time courses that they want to teach. So that's an interesting topic that I think is paramount in its need to be understood by college age as well as individuals in the larger community.
So I wanted to ask you a few specific questions about precision teaching. And one of those would be, or the first one would be, in a nutshell, how would you define precision teaching?
I think precision teaching is just monitoring teaching and learning behavior using standard acceleration charts or various standard acceleration charts because you could use timings charts through yearly charts. But I think that's the key aspect. So any part of your teaching behavior could be attempted or tried, and as long as you're monitoring what you're doing and also monitoring what the students are doing, then you've got a pretty good idea of how to proceed because you find out what's working and what isn't. So the whole monitoring aspect is what I link, is how I link the standard acceleration chart to precision teaching and precision learning.
So in my blog, one of the things that I have done and I'm still doing is looking at all the different definitions of precision teaching, and what you said is captured by most everyone. So that brings me to the question of, you talked about SAFMEDs, and then in precision teaching, there are different ways people practice fluency. In the past, there were different systems of analyzing behavior, like the is, does, or is it the is, did?
The most recent that I was talking about was the is, did.
Okay, the is, did. So, and there are other aspects to it too. So, where do those different types of concepts fall into, or how are they part of precision teaching?
Well, the SAFMEDs are just one vehicle, sort of along with practice sheets, that give learners sort of easy access to practice and learning the materials that they're supposed to be learning. And you can monitor that learning behavior very easily with daily timings and charting that on standard charts. So a lot of, and there are other features of teaching that are easily monitored as well that could be part of precision teaching as long as you monitored it. But sometimes we just do things and sort of forget to monitor or don't monitor. So that's a different ballpark, and language for analyzing behavior, and I kind of got away from it because it was, he had a difficult time getting people to understand how to do it and how to do it properly. And he felt that a lot of the terms were difficult to use, particularly for teachers. And so he really believed that the plain English terminology was ideally suited for precision teaching, and left a lot of the language of that effort in the background. It's still probably pertinent, but he certainly didn't emphasize it.
So, if I could repeat this, what I think you're saying is the thrust of precision teaching, the monitoring aspect. So, if you're interested in learning, if you're interested in teaching, as far as precision teaching is concerned, the main point is that you are displaying that on a standard acceleration chart, of which we have a few different types, the daily, the weekly, and so on. And things like SAFMEDs and practice sheets, they have been outgrowths of different tactics to help with learning.
Right. There's another feature to it that is a little more difficult to monitor because it goes beyond the classroom. But it involves the notion, okay, here we've used this particular system where we've monitored, we've taught using various techniques and tried for fluency and monitored the behavior. But once the student gets through this particular class or this particular experience, has that experience had enough impact on them that they would go ahead and try to continue using any of these techniques or procedures. And not only for learning, but for monitoring other aspects of one's life. So one's financial picture, or one's relationships, or one's recreational pursuits. Has one seen enough of the benefit of charting to apply it to other aspects of one's life?
So, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about, I don't know if this is exactly what you're saying, but I've heard Clay Starlin give talks, and he has, in some instances, gotten away from the term precision teaching and has talked about a science of learning, and has talked almost that, I guess if you think about what precision teaching is, certainly the chart is very important to that, and there are different rules, strategies that have been developed under that banner. Whereas beyond that, you could use the chart in almost anything, which wouldn't necessarily be precision teaching, but would be using the chart just for monitoring. And so, am I making sense? Am I correct?
Yeah, to my way of thinking, that would be the definition of precision teaching.
Okay.
So a lot of the things that we do as precision teachers just happen to be currently the best way we found to operate. But you could really call anything precision teaching as long as you were monitoring what you were doing with standard charting.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that I think Ogg had originally was that precision was just an adjective, and you could have precision anything. And so the main component of it was the monitoring aspect through standard acceleration chart. So as long as you were monitoring what you were doing, then you could be doing various types of curricula or various teaching strategies, and it would still be intertwined with precision teaching and could be called precision teaching because you were monitoring it using a standard acceleration chart. So a lot of the things like 1-minute timings and SAFMEDs and practice sheets that we think of as being very much involved as part of precision teaching are really not, from my way of thinking, that the definition of precision teaching. They just happen to be procedures that a lot of precision teachers use. But you could actually teach without using any of those and still be a precision teacher if you monitored what you were doing with standard acceleration charts.
So if you're interested in managing behavior, let's say that you're a behavior specialist and you're only concerned with managing behavior, changing behavior, then you're a precision behavior manager, modifier, whatever you'd like to call. So you wouldn't necessarily be using practicing, you'd be looking at the application of different procedures and what effects that has on the behavior.
Right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I hope I didn't misrepresent Clay's idea, so I think that'll be something to ask him in a future podcast.
Yeah, well, he has been working on an article that I think is a very important one, and really is trying to get education to be scientific, and using a standard chart is certainly a big step in the right direction.
Let me ask you this. Thinking about, you've been around precision teaching, well, from near the beginning. I mean, I imagine if, I've seen different dates and people have cited different dates, but sometimes in the 60s seems to be the birth of precision teaching. Certainly the 70s was a very fertile time for precision teaching, and it's been growing ever since. So you've had the site of precision teaching for 35 some years. Where do you see it going, or where would you like to see it go? There's two questions there.
Now, well, as with the process, there's always some false starts or blind alleys. So I think that's been true of precision teaching as well. But from my perspective, I think it's in very good shape in 2007. Not ideal shape, but very good shape in that there are very key individuals, dedicated individuals in a number of different areas who are really carrying the ball and moving forward. And so I think that's the key to success is to have just multiple dedicated individuals. Where I'd like to see it going, of course, is to have a bigger impact on our education system, because obviously our education system could really benefit from having standard acceleration charting and precision teaching be more known and used. But it's also, I think, a likelihood that, or at least a possibility that with the capabilities that are developing in computer systems and computer charting, that we're going to see really a lot of new ways to use standard acceleration charting in the next year or two that I think will be a nice opportunity for the area to grow even more profoundly.
Mm-hmm. So so you're thinking about the display of data, or how precision teaching, so with the monitoring aspect, or you're also thinking of different techniques for learning?
Yes, really all of those, but there are a number of aspects which we haven't looked at all that closely. For example, bounce.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what do we mean by bounce, and what is bounce really telling us? Or chart stat. The jump test and the turn test really haven't been used that much, but those are very, very powerful tools in behavioral science that have really been largely unknown and unused to this point. So the teaching of charting with more of an emphasis on just using computer capabilities to generate easy information access, I think, is just around the corner.
That's a wonderful answer. Let me ask you this. Is there anything that I could have asked you that I didn't, or any other topics you'd like to talk before we end our interview?
I just want to say again that there are a number of other people that within the whole area that I've enjoyed knowing and sharing and learning from, sharing information with them and learning from. And you're certainly one of them. It's really nice to have a former student go on and really be an exemplar in a field, and you've certainly done that.
Well, thank you. I certainly I can never thank you enough. I think, and this is true, I've talked to other of your students, we certainly wouldn't be where we are today without your commitment and your excellent teaching of us, and that's something I always be thankful to you for. So.
Well, thanks, Rick.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Steve, for spending your part of your afternoon with me, and I appreciate your time. Okay. Well, that was a great interview with Dr. Graf. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. One announcement I'd like to make. The Precision Teaching Conference will be occurring this November. And if you would like to make a submission for the conference, you have until, the end of this month, I believe, to get your presentation in there. So if you're like me, your last minute person, then get that in there, and I'll look forward to seeing you in November. So thank you very much. As usual, I appreciate your email feedback, and I look forward to podcasting again this coming July.